Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, another Toys and Joys step-by-step model build. Well, a few months ago on the show, I brought you, I believe it was a 7-part series on making Toys and Joys 1929 Ford stake bed truck build. And the response of that step-by-step series was phenomenal. It was almost overwhelming how much you guys responded to it, and I received multiple requests to do another build. And there were so many requests to do another one that I couldn't ignore it. I had to start producing a new build. So here we are a few months later, and I thought, let's do this. So what I did is I handed my wife a box of Toys and Joys patterns, and I said, pick one. Which one would you like to see built? And what she picked was pattern 130, which is the new Excavator. Now, guys, this is, I'm not going to lie to you, this is a challenging build. But hopefully, through this series, and I don't care how many parts it is, through this series, hopefully you will gain the confidence and the knowledge that you need to complete this model. So, there's a ton of stuff to cover in today's episode. I really want to get this going. So enough of me talking, let's get into the build. We're going to start the build with one of the easier pieces to make, and that will be this rotating base. So from our plans, we can get our main overall dimensions, which are right here on two different views, and the thickness is right up here at the top, 3/4 of an inch. So what I've done is I've cut a block of wood to those dimensions. And for this pattern, I mean, I could photocopy it and stick it down to here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure these angles here, and I'm just going to draw out this pattern. It's a simple enough pattern. So once you get this drawn out onto your wood, you can move on with drilling of the holes. So what I've drawn out here is essentially the basic shape of what we have right here. I've just transposed the measurements onto my block of wood, and I've also marked our center point. We need to drill 2 holes here, and if we look, we can see that there is a hole. This is the cross section. So we have a 1-inch diameter hole in the bottom that is 5/16 of an inch deep. If this measurement weren't here, you could just measure right here and see how deep that hole is. And you can see there that is 5/16 of an inch. So if you're ever unsure, you can double check on the drawings. So what we're going to do is we need to take this over to the drill press. We're going to set up the fence so that the center is the same no matter what we do, as long as we don't move our drill press table. And the first thing we're going to do is drill this 1-inch diameter hole, 5/16 of an inch deep, and then change our bit to a 1/4 inch. But we won't move our fence, and we will drill from there our 1/4 inch through hole right in the middle as well. Now we can see right here on the top of this piece we have a little bit of a chamfer, and that is what we're going to concentrate on next. It doesn't tell you how much of a chamfer, but you can scale off the drawings. So here we have 9/16, and it comes in 11/16. So I will transfer those marks onto our piece of stock. Now there is all kinds of ways that we could put this chamfer on there, but I'm going to go simple with this one and just use a block plane. And after a while, you should have your tapers here. Now, if you're having problems with control, or you're having problems getting them even and you're running out of time because you're coming up to your lines, back off on your plane blade. Take a lighter pass, take a little skim. You're not in a rush. Just take thinner slices and, you know, adjust as you go, and everything will be just fine, even if it's not perfect. This isn't a mating piece from what I can see to anything else. The chamfer is nothing more than decorative, so if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. Consider it as practice for your block plane. So now that we have that done, we're going to flip it over, and those lines that we transferred here for our main shape, we are going to take this over to the scroll saw, and we are going to cut this out as carefully as we can. Now with 3/4 inch thick stock, I am going to be using a number 7 reverse tooth blade, and you may be wondering why I am entering the blade through blade entry holes. It is very difficult to line up a scroll saw blade no matter how good you are with that corner and get it perfect. So we're going to treat this as an interior cut. This way, as we come along here, we can exit perfectly out at the corner and get those nice crisp corners that we want. So all we need to do is follow the lines carefully, and you should be just fine. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and the reason being, I don't like the way this blade is cutting. This is not a new blade. It seems to be wandering a lot, and I can see why. It's bent. It has taken some damage. So I'm going to replace the blade and get these pieces cut. And you can see there how nicely we've exited right on the corner instead of trying to line it up with that corner. All right, so we'll get the other side cut, and that'll be it for this piece. And in no time at all, we've got the first piece of our model made. Well on our way. See, I told you could do this. Now we're going to turn to some easier stuff for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to make all of these circles here. I want to start with these larger ones because for me, I'm going to tell you the truth, I'm going to be turning these on a lathe, but a lot of you guys don't have a lathe. So I'm going to start with one of them. It doesn't matter. Let's start with this one, turn base 1. It's, if you look here on the profile, it's 1/4 inch thick, and it is 2 3/4 inch in diameter with a 1/4 inch through hole. If you don't have a lathe, I'm going to show you how you can make it without one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark this out on some stock. So the first thing that we're going to do, I have some 1/4 inch thick cherry here. I'm going to mark out my 2 3/4 inch diameter circle. Okay, and at this point, that little pin prick there where our fulcrum of our compass was, that's where we're going to drill our 1/4 inch diameter hole. So let's get that drilled. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw, and I'm going to cut just outside of the lines. If you don't have a scroll saw, you want to use a fret saw, you can do that. In fact, you know what? Let's do that. Let's use a fret saw instead of a scroll saw to show you that it is possible to do it. So what I have is my little fret saw table that we made here on the show not too long ago. And all we're going to do is, just like as if we were the scroll saw, we'll get this started. And we're going to cut just outside the line. Okay, and there we have our circle cut just outside of the line. So what do we do with it now? Well, now we have to bring it down to its final dimension of 2 3/4. So for that, you're just going to need, you can use a bolt or a little piece of 1/4 inch threaded rod. So we're going to take a 1 inch long 1/4 inch bolt. We're going to, there's a 1/4 thread. We're going to place a 1/4 inch washer on it and then place it through our disc. We're going to take another 1/4 inch washer. We're going to take a lock washer, just like that, and then a 1/4 inch nut. Okay, and then we will tighten everything up. At this point now, you can mount this in your cordless drill or even in your drill press, but I'm going to use a cordless drill just to make it a little more portable. And all I'm going to do, I have some sandpaper here that is mounted with spray adhesive to some 3/4 inch MDF, and we're just going to use our drill, hold it as level as possible, and slowly sand our edges. Now keep an eye on your line to make sure that you're not going to get too close and go over. And in a very short amount of time, you will have your 3/4 inch wheel. Check that out. That is a perfectly round, perfectly centered wheel, or in this case, I'm not even sure what it's called on the plans, but that is perfect. And it took no time at all to get that done. Now, you can utilize this process for making your wheels for your vehicles or any circular part that you need. So although this is not my preferred method, it is possible, it does work. You don't need all the fancy tools in order to make the stuff that I make. You can use alternative methods. So there you go, there's one of our wheels done. I'm going to do them all in the same fashion, and we'll carry on with this. Well, before long, you'll have all of these pieces shaped, and I will give you a suggestion. Here, for the rear roller wheels, where you need to make 2 of them, make them both at the same time. Then you have 2 of them will be absolutely identical, and you won't have variances in their sizes. So, we're now going to turn our attention to the roller base block. This piece is a nightmare. I have been looking at this for about an hour, shaking my head at it. The different views do give you a picture. They do paint a picture of what it should look like, but it's a little confusing. Then when you turn to up here in our, I guess, our assembly exploded view, we can see that there is kind of a squared off shelf all the way until you get back to this back section right here. And that back section has a 45 chamfer. There is no way that you can cut this with a table saw and get that proper cut. So we are actually going to make this in 2 different pieces. I'm going to show you how, but before we do that, what I want to do is I need a couple of photocopies of this pattern. So what I've done is I've scaled off the drawing and I have cut 2 pieces of walnut, both of them measuring 1 7/16 of an inch wide and 1 3/16 of an inch high. And I have laid down a layer of masking tape across the 1 3/16 inch side and sprayed the photocopies of the pattern with spray adhesive, let it tack up for 3 minutes, and I have stuck it down here. Now, the very first thing that I want to do is we need to drill all of these holes, not this one. That one will be later. So we are going to center punch carefully all of these 1/8 inch diameter holes and this 1/4 inch diameter through hole. Take them over to the drill press and drill them all. You want to take it slowly with the 1/8 inch diameter holes. A 1/8 diameter drill bit, if you press too hard through walnut, can deflect and you'll get a crooked hole. You want them perfectly perpendicular to the surface. So just be careful and drill slowly with a sharp bit. Now, because these holes will be the axles for a bunch of wheels, it's important that they all line up properly. So you want to use your fence. Use your fence so that they are all at the same distance from the bottom. That way all your wheels will ride at the same level. So at this point now, we need to take this over to the table saw. So we will cut it right at that line right here and save these parts. what you want to do is mark these parts for which one goes with which, so that when we glue them together, we can try to create the illusion that they are made out of all one piece. Well, on each of these pieces now, we're going to work on this longer section. The first thing that I want to do is I want to cut this radius right here. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw. I'm going to cut this off. If you don't have a scroll saw, you can use a coping saw like what I showed you, or a band saw. We're just going to cut it outside the line, and then we're going to take it over to the belt sander and finish it off. So with those ends now shaped, before we can move on, we're going to take this over to the scroll saw, and I'm just going to cut this square profile here. You can do it on the bandsaw if you like, whatever you wish, but we need to get this cut. Okay, well, both of those are now shaped, and it's now time to cut the rabbets that are here on the left and the right. If we look here at the plans, we can see them. This is the confusing part if you're not used to looking at blueprints. And you can see them right here drawn out. This rabbet that runs along the longer section of this piece, it is 9/32 of an inch high, and it is 1/4 of an inch wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the table saw. You can use a regular table saw blade. I have a Dado blade that I would prefer to use. It gives me a much cleaner cut, and I'm going to set it for a height of 9/32 of an inch, and we are going to cut in both of these pieces. We are going to cut that rabbet that is required on both sides of the piece. Well, this is where marking our pieces is so important. What we're going to do is very, very carefully, we are going to apply glue to this side here, and then using a straight edge and a nice flat board, we are going to line up these two pieces and glue them back together. Take your time on this, get the best alignment you possibly can, and the better your alignment, the more time you take to do this properly, the better your final product is going to look. So get these two pieces now, paying attention to which one goes with which, get them both glued back together, and then let them completely cure. Well, these have dried overnight, and we just want to give them a very light sanding on all sides just to clean up the glue joint. We need to make a right and a left of these pieces, and up until now everything has been identical, but now we need to cut some angles, and all the angles are different. So I have marked my left and my right, and I've also marked the inside edge of each one. And we can now head to the table saw, because we're going to cut these angles here on the drawing. We will measure carefully and cut these two angles here, which are both 25 degrees. We will do that by tilting our table saw blade and carefully running our piece through. We will then change our blade to a 35-degree angle, and we will cut this bottom right angle here on the piece. That actually is the inside edge. The inside bottom edge is the 35-degree angle. So we can get those three pieces ripped, and then we need to do some dados. So the first thing we're going to do is cut our center dado here, and we can see on the drawing that it is 9/16 of an inch high. It is 9/16 of an inch in from the inner edge of your piece, and it is 3/8 of an inch wide. Most of these measurements were obtained by scaling off the drawing. I have a dado blade set here, 9/16 of an inch high. I have my fence set so that it will cut 9/16 of an inch from the inside edge, and all we're going to do is run this through on both pieces to get our center dado. We will now cut the wider dado for this piece. And for this one, we've lowered the blade to 7/16 of an inch. And we will set our fence so that we will trim each side. We don't need to cut the full width. You just want to make sure that your piece is fully supported by your throat plate while you're running this through. You don't want it to dip in and catch and get a kickback or ruin your piece. So carefully run this through, flipping 180 degrees after each cut, and you should come up with something that looks like this. And at this point, we can cut our pieces to their final length of 9 7/8 of an inch just by setting a stop block on our miter fence and running it through the table saw. Now at this point, I want to route this 1/16 of an inch wide detail here at the back of each piece. I'm going to use a 1/16 diameter router bit over at the router table with a stop block on my fence in order to do this. If you don't have that kind of a setup, you can very easily use your bandsaw blade and just run it through with a miter fence and just touch it to your piece to get a depth of 1/16 of an inch. And you should end up with something that looks like that. We now need to drill this hole. It's just a simple matter of marking it on our piece, taking it over to the drill press and drilling a 1/4 inch through hole in our blank. So the last 2 angled cuts here at the back for this profile, I've measured them to be 60 and 45, and they are just simple miter cuts over at the table saw using your miter fence. So there's a couple things left to do here, and that would be this slot here and this, I don't know, rabbet you'd call it here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to measure them out. I'm going to mark them on each piece individually. I'm going to take them over to the scroll saw and I'm going to cut them out just because that is my preferred method. If you guys don't have a scroll saw and you'd like to use your bandsaw, use your bandsaw. I would not recommend using a table saw for this unless you have something like a mortise and tenon jig where you could cut this using the tenoning jig and it would be safely clamped in place. And after some light sanding, you should have something that looks just like this. It's bang on to the drawing, bang on to the pattern. A challenge, but not impossible. So what do we have so far? We have our left and our right roller base blocks. We have our rotator base. We have our turn base number 3, our turn base number 2, our turn base number 1, and we have our 2 rear roller wheels, which would be right here. Not bad. Not bad at all. And unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this week's show. I think we've made some pretty good progress. A lot of the time and a lot of the procedure was spent on these pieces. And I have to tell you, I'm going to be straight up. This is one of the most challenging pieces in all the models I've ever made. This one was extremely challenging. And it's not challenging because it's hard. It's challenging because of the thought process involved. You really got to run through the process in your head. Do as many procedures on the block while it's still in its square state, and then go from there. The more flat square edges that you can have on the surface of your tools, the better reference point, the more accurate cuts you're going to get. So the hardest part was the thought process, and I've pretty much given you that step by step here in today's show. But over a 2-day period, 7 hours to make these 2 pieces, and that does not include drying time for the glue or anything like that. That is 7 hours of setup, test, cut, setup, test, cut, measure, mark, layout, 7 hours. So be patient, guys. Be patient. Relax. You've got nothing to do. You're not in a hurry. You're in no rush. Take your time. Spend your 7 hours. and get awesome results like these. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. It's just part one of however many parts it takes to get this done, but I hope you've enjoyed the content today. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you won't miss the notifications of future shows like all the rest of the episodes of this series. If you're interested in following along, I will post the link to this pattern down below in the comments section. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I hope you're going to try this for yourself. I hope you're going to follow along and give these things a whirl because they are a load of fun. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.